Nicolas Cage as Dracula. That was the selling point of Renfield, a horror action comedy about Dracula's servant Renfield attempting to escape their toxic relationship. Dracula is one of the most iconic characters of all time, but his servant Renfield? That's a character that I had never heard of until the release of this movie. So can we just take a moment to acknowledge how horrible of an idea it was to simply title this film Renfield and expect people to want to see it? On top of that, there seems to be next to no marketing for this movie, which is a shame because it turned out to be a very fun and original take on the classic Dracula story. Set in modern-day New Orleans, Renfield struggles with the morality of serving Dracula and the challenges associated with feeding his master. With the help of a local support group, Renfield starts fighting back against Dracula's narcissistic tendencies and begins to build a life of his own, much to the dismay of his master. The film is aware that most people likely have no clue who Renfield actually is, and so with the use of flashbacks, the film explains his history and powers, while also creatively paying homage to previous Dracula movies. The story itself is pretty basic. It plays out pretty much exactly as you would expect from a film such as this. However, the film doesn't get lazy with its simple premise, and still puts effort into making sure that the story makes sense. Plot points are properly set up and paid off, allowing for everything to come together in a satisfying manner that doesn't feel contrived. Yet, while the story's extreme predictability may fail to capture your interest, the action and characters will surely keep you entertained throughout. When it comes to the action in this movie, I was not prepared for what this film had to offer. I had managed to avoid seeing any of the trailers, and when it came to the film's R rating for blood and gore, I simply brushed it aside as, this is a vampire movie. Obviously there's going to be blood and violence involved. This attitude towards the movie left me completely off guard for the extreme levels of comedic violence that this film gleefully puts on display. People explode, their arms are ripped off, and heads are sent flying amongst a myriad of other creatively violent methods of killing people. Each injury is accompanied by an over-the-top geyser of blood bursting from the wounds, leaving every location drenched in blood after a fight scene. The violence manages to stand out not only because of how over-the-top it is, but also because it is achieved through the use of practical effects. The strong use of practical effects paired with the over-the-top violence leaves the action feeling almost like the early 2000s X-Men films, if the action had been directed by Quentin Tarantino. Now, let's talk about Nicolas Cage as Dracula. It should go without saying that he is perfect for this role. It is clear that he has taken inspiration from the previous portrayals of Dracula and tried to pay respect to them in one way or another, while still adding his own unique flair to the character, which helps Cage's Dracula to stand on his own, rather than feeling like a cheap parody of the character. Despite being a more comedic portrayal of the character, Cage's Dracula retains the dignity of account, while being able to perfectly balance the terror and comedy of the character in a way that only Nicolas Cage could truly pull off. Nicolas Cage as Dracula is the selling point of this movie, and his performance definitely delivers. However, this film doesn't follow Dracula. Instead, his assistant Renfield, played by Nicholas Hoult, leads this movie. This is a decision which could have very easily ruined this movie. Luckily, Nicholas Hoult is an excellent fit for Renfield. He manages to be an entertaining lead without ever feeling overshadowed by the presence of Nicolas Cage as Dracula. He truly sells Renfield as a weak dependent trapped in an abusive relationship that you can't help but feel sorry for. His search for independence was compelling enough in its own right that I never felt like Cage's Dracula was underutilized. Helping Renfield escape from Dracula's influence is Awkwafina's character, Rebecca. She is a police officer trying to take down a local drug cartel when Renfield's activities cause their paths to become crossed. While I typically find the characters that Awkwafina plays to be too obnoxiously loud and over-exaggerated, here her performance works with the rest of the movie. She is meant to be an antithesis to Renfield, so Awkwafina's more exaggerated performance bolsters her character's confidence, which is something that Renfield is sorely lacking. Her outgoing personality complements the more reserved Renfield, giving them a fairly strong dynamic that feels natural. Overall, Renfield is a bloody good throwback to the more campy era of the 2000s. It takes its absurd premise and has fun exploring it in gory detail, which allows this film to stand out in an era full of so many uninspired releases. While it's not something to prioritize watching, it will definitely keep you entertained on a night where you find yourself mindlessly scrolling through the near endless amount of content to watch. It also perfectly fits as a horror-themed movie to watch in October, especially if you don't really enjoy scary movies. That is, assuming you don't mind the comically exaggerated violence. And that about wraps up my thoughts on Renfield. Were you aware that this film was connected to Dracula? Or were you like me and completely unaware that this film had anything to do with the Prince of Darkness? Let me know in the comments, and until next time, thanks for watching.